everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our 6th episode of season 20, a very special guest, an expert in porn and sex addiction recovering process, Jessica Jordan. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. And yeah, so Jessica Jordan here in Northern California in the Redwood Forest. And I am a former wildlife biologist who underwent my own incredible healing journey with PTSD and adult trauma, childhood trauma, brain damage, hypersexuality disorder, being with a man who was a narcissist, alcoholic, porn addict.
Whoa.
And boy, did that send me on one heck of a healing journey. And now my life mission and purpose is to help men who are suffering from pornography addiction or any sex-related addiction, who they want to heal, and they want to heal deeply and thoroughly. And now I know how to do that very successfully. It's incredible. It's amazing. It's rewarding. I almost feel like I get to celebrate the own success of my healing journey every time I see someone else going through and having amazing success in their healing journey. So it is deeply rewarding.
I can imagine. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for being here today. Now, let's just jump into the DeLorean time machine and go into the past and see, you mentioned that the brain injury caused the hypersexuality. So can you explain to our listeners, what is the correlation?
Absolutely. So February of 2016, I had ingested a naturally occurring seafood neurotoxin called ciguatera that sent me on a 5-year recovery journey, several years off work, on disability, nearly took my life many, many, many times. And one of the things that is extremely common with head trauma or brain damage, or even other types of trauma, is it can induce something called hypersexuality disorder. It's more common than what people would think. And this basically sets that individual, in this case, me, to have an extremely, extremely high libido. It's like on sexual overdrive. And, I don't think there's any research studies that I know about as to, one of my hypotheses as to the reason why is, in order for anyone to heal from any trauma, any addiction, any chronic illness, of which I had all of those, there is a certain neurochemical that must be present, and it's oxytocin. And the sexual experience, it really elevates the oxytocin. So I'm curious if it's one of the ways that the subconscious mind, in its own innate wisdom, says, let's go and create deep desires to create experiences to elevate the single neurochemical that is the most important for the healing journey. But it can also be done in a, there could be a safe and healthy way to do that. And then there could be a self-sabotaging way that can be, addictive and unhealthy. And so what adult PTSD does is it subconsciously brings up old subconscious patterns within us that are pre-existing. And so it allowed me to surface and see for the first time I had childhood trauma that I was unaware of. I learned that reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I learned I had childhood trauma and all this stuff. And on the healing journey, I realized I had extremely low subconscious self-worth, and never realized that until massive, the brain damage, the trauma, all the stuff. Now, the healing journey requires you to go so deeply inward within you and become so intimately aware of who you are and why you are, and what potential things of the past could cause emotional wounds that could set a person up to have subconscious patterns that are self-sabotaging. So one of those for me was my subconscious low self-worth one of my patterns I had before the brain damage was using my sexuality as a form of external validation in order to seek a sense of value. And so the brain damage and the hypersexuality disorder, it took all of that to an extreme, extreme, extreme. So now my subconscious mind goes, hey, you need to learn how to feel valuable. This is the way that we've learned how to do it, is through your sexuality. Let's skyrocket that. And so
That's
hence, yeah.
that's incredible. But do you think that hypersexuality can be misconstrued to being nymphomaniac?
Yes. So there can definitely be an overlap. Someone who has hypersexuality disorder could be very well likely, and in many cases, have that nymphomaniac behavior in their life, and it turns into a sex addiction, essentially.
Okay.
And it all comes down to connection with yourself, connection with other people, fear of rejection, all these things, that subconscious low self-worth. And when it comes to pornography never rejects you. So it feels safe. When it comes to real sexual encounters, there actually is a bit of vulnerability there. And so what I was deeply, deeply wanting and seeking and needing was an incredibly deep emotional connection.
I see.
Through the sexual experience, which also involved empathy. I wasn't receiving that at all. And in fact, since I was dating a man who was severely addicted to pornography, 99.999% of the times he would reject my sexual advances because he had porn-induced erectile dysfunction, extreme performance anxiety, and the neural pathways in his brain had come to learn that the sexual experience happens when you are alone and when you have a digital screen in front of you. So this is very common for men who are addicted to pornography, that even if the woman or whoever's on the screen were to step out of the screen and be in the bedroom with you in real life, all of a sudden, they couldn't perform sexually because the neural pathways in the brain goes, wait, hold up, there's another person in the room. This isn't how we have the sexual experience. And there's performance anxiety and all sorts of things that go on that just are not very healthy, right?
Oh, absolutely. But do you feel that this connection between looking at a porn site or whatever, and then actually connecting with someone, because obviously intimacy is just more than physical attraction. It has the emotional aspect of it. So you mentioned that your boyfriend was also narcissistic. Do you think this plays a role in him being completely detached emotionally to the individual, to the woman that he's with, and focusing too much on a delusional world that is porn?
Yes. And I also know that he had some childhood trauma that was, that's a big, big way how narcissism can show. I mean, narcissism is one of your areas of expertise.
Correct.
And so because of his childhood trauma, pornography felt like a safer option than being with a real person and having those real connections. People who develop narcissism, those feel like safer options, like real connection subconsciously on a very deep visceral level feels way too unsafe. So their subconscious mind just doesn't go there.
But do you think that he felt that he needed to prove to you something? Because obviously the narcissistic people, they are primarily looking to have all the attention on them. But then if that is the case, did he feel that he was disappointing you in any shape or form because he was addicted to porn? Or do you feel that he could not perform because he did have ED?
Yeah, so when he realized he had ED, it was with the woman he met before he met me.
Okay.
And when we were first together, initially he was telling me that he was not engaging in the sexual experience because he had too much respect for me. And in time, he bravely divulged the information that he had a porn addiction. It affected his performance, that he had all this performance anxiety. I know that he felt deep, deep shame around it, and he was able to eventually communicate those things to me. And so does that help answer your question?
Yeah, obviously showing vulnerability is one thing, but this is kind of like an opposite personality trait of a narcissistic person. Unless
Right.
it's like covert narcissistic or vulnerable narcissism, then yeah, he will express himself differently than someone who is malignant narcissist. As you know, there's different spectrum of it. But did you help him in his journey? Because it seems like your specialty is helping people who are dealing with porn or sexual addiction.
I deeply wanted to help him and had many, many, many attempts. There was almost, like maybe 2 or 3 times he was a tiny bit open to it.
Okay.
But for the most part, he wasn't willing to let that stuff go. His alcoholism was a stronger addiction than his pornography addiction. He would use pornography addiction to help actually encourage him to drink. He would hire women to make sexy hypnotic videos to tell him that it's okay to drink his whiskey, pour another drink, and they would be speaking to him using his name in a very hypnotic way. So that would be the time that he could drink guilt-free, essentially.
Okay.
Uh,
So how did you manage with him having all of those typical addiction that we see in people, but instead of having all of them in one person, or instead of having in different people, it's all in one. So how did you manage, or did he prompted you to become a porn and sexual addiction person, or what really triggered you to be that besides yourself, of course?
Yeah, so it was actually during a self-compassion meditation that I was doing because I needed to do a pattern interrupt away from self-sabotaging, self-loathing thoughts. And I had been doing a lot of that work for over a year, specifically on self-compassion. And
Okay.
I ended up feeling so amazingly full and whole and complete. And it was during a Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation. And I felt so much self-compassion that that wholeness, that feeling of completeness, I was crying and tears and sobbing. And there was only one thing in the world that I wanted at this point. And it was for other people in the world to feel as amazing as I did in that moment. It was everyone deserves to feel as good, no matter who you are, what you've done, where you're going. And then my subconscious mind presented a question to me: who needs this the most? And then the answer came: men suffering from pornography addiction. And I had, in that moment, I go, oh my gosh, I have the solution. What? I've been doing all this inner trauma work, PTSD work, all this stuff. And I would, like, for years, I had been diving deep into the scientific literature on neurobiology and psychology and what are the conditions that must be present physically, emotionally, cognitively, the thoughts, everything in the human body and mind. And it was, oh my gosh, I have the formula. And in that moment, Leap of Courage, the program that I created, it was created in my mind. And that was over 4 years ago now. And it was as a result of me being deeply aware of his experience with suffering from pornography addiction. And then also my personal experience of healing from trauma, PTSD, all of these things. And when I had hypersexuality disorder, at the time, I didn't even view it as a problem. The problem I saw was that I couldn't find a partner to love me in the way that I wanted. That's the problem I saw.
But
It
did you
was
take any medication to reduce oxytocin production, or it
no,
was done with meditation? It was done through the practice that you had?
no, yeah, there was no medications, nothing like it was just primarily meditation and occasionally psilocybin that I would a little bit with the meditations to deepen them.
I see. So what kind of, if you for the listeners to know, so what kind of journey do you take them through to be able to kind of guide them to not have any incentive or desire to be able to go on any of the porn site and start watching and re-triggering those kind of memories or those traumatic experiences?
Yeah, so they have their own incentives before they even come to me for help, which is their pre-existing incentives is why they come asking for help. And I do help to enhance that for them we go through a process of imagining your life when pornography stays in your life? What's the trajectory of your life going to be versus, visualizing and feeling into what it's going to be like? First, you define what it's going to be like. It's not just, I want this thing gone. We can't just have something gone. There will be a void. You have to be the conscious creator of what you want to fill the void with. So I take them through the process of intense and amazing, deep, deep, deep self-awareness and becoming a detective of all of these parts of who they are before they even knew they're already existing, but they're unaware of it. And a lot of those are subconscious patterns. And then I have them go through a process of, all right, you've identified all the subconscious patterns that are holding you back from where you defined you want to be. Now let's create a new pattern, consciously defined for yourself what you want each and new pattern to show up as. So it goes from a limiting pattern on a subconscious level to an empowering pattern. And these patterns are emotional responses, beliefs, limiting beliefs, all sorts of things, decisions. And then we do the subconscious work to essentially download it into the subconscious mind. Now the subconscious mind is operating in a way that they have defined. So I call it the 3Ds: detect, define, download. Detect all of your subconscious self-sabotaging patterns. Define what you would rather have them be instead, and then download them into your subconscious mind so it's your new operating system. And I have a 50 hours worth of material recorded in my online course.
Okay.
And then we meet every 2 hours as a group, Bravery Boot Camp, and they can ask any questions that they want. It is incredible. Oh man, we were in tears last night. We were hitting some gold, and they can share their wins and celebrations. And it is just so incredible to see these brave group of incredible men. They are my heroes. They show up. They support each other so much.
So is it like the same thing as SA, which is sexual addiction group, like NA or AA, whatever, all those are Alcoholic Anonymous group? Do you feel that those who actually are addicted to oxytocin or the pleasure hormone, can they go through your program the same way as someone who's hypersexual and they could just go through the same process? Or is there someone that has that specific addiction to sex versus porn?
So I love that question. Thank you. So the way that my program is set up is it's the same strategies no matter what addiction they show up with. They show up with either a porn or some sex-related addiction, but then I have them identify every single escapism behavior in their life.
Okay.
So they show up oftentimes with other addictions. And once they're in my program, we actually tackle every single addiction that they have, whether it's cocaine, gambling, and eating addiction, video games, like you name it, they're there. We see it. And if we don't address all of these other escapism behaviors, then when you try to get rid of one addiction, then the other ones amplify and show up even more. And it's like playing addiction whack-a-mole if you don't address it holistically and get more to the root cause. There's addiction is merely a symptom of unresolved childhood trauma or emotional wounds of the past.
Well, you did mention the void. So if, let's say, you cure one addiction, are they going to try to amplify the other one that is missing? Because it's all about balance, but this is a negative balance that they have in their, like from within them. So how do they create this difference in terms of, okay, well, now I no longer have alcohol addiction. So because of that void, I'm going to put more into porn. So, but if you tackle a lot of them at the same time, you're spreading yourself too thin, it becomes too overwhelming, and you give up.
So it only becomes overwhelming if you don't have the right strategies in play. When you have the right strategies in play, then you're providing your nervous system with the neurochemicals of safety. And when someone is acting out on an addictive behavior, we can call those escapisms because it's the number one trigger to engage in any addictive behavior or escapism. It's escaping the reality of the pain of your own life.
Okay.
And so when any stress response is the number one trigger to have a relapse for addiction. So when we create the neurochemicals of safety, that's the opposite of a stress response.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the subconscious mind and your physical body and your thoughts, you don't feel overwhelmed.
Okay. And so how long is your program, Jessica? I mean, one in terms of, do you offer them some sort of guarantee to tell them like after 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or 20 weeks, whatever it is, you'll be at least cured from a minimum of 2 or 3 addiction that they have? Or do they come to you and tell you, okay, I've got 10 addiction, how do I resolve them?
Yeah. So essentially, they all have lifetime access to my entire program, because who am I to put a date on someone else's healing journey? Everyone's going to show up with a different amount of trauma, a different intensity of addiction, different number of hours available in their day that they're going to be able to devote to it. There's so many variables. So that's why everyone has a lifetime access to all of it. And I say, once you go through the entire program within 6 months,
Okay.
and you're not satisfied, then you can get a full refund, or I will work with you one-on-one to help you get your results, which is really what you want. And
Oh,
if and if someone gets to that point where they've done the entire program and they're not getting their results, then that's an indicator to me that something is missing, which means it would be a good idea for me to work one-on-one with that person and see, hey, what's going on? What's missing? Let me learn and expand and grow my course so that the next person who comes along, they don't have that missing gap.
oh, interesting. Okay. And your groups are how many people usually in average?
They're smallish groups. They can be anywhere from 4 to 12.
Okay.
And some guys show up, pretty regularly. Some guys hop in once every few months,
Okay.
right? It's everyone's journey is different. Some guys will show up and for a short amount of time, and then they'll disappear for 6 months or a year, and then they come back. They're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm committed this time. I'm ready.
But this lack of accountability, Jessica, doesn't show you that they're not really serious in helping themselves get away from this type of addiction. Because again, if you show that you're serious about wanting to find a way out, you're going to show up. But those who are
Exactly.
very kind of flaky, then the result will show accordingly.
Yeah, and that's going to be true for anyone in addiction recovery anywhere. It's very common. And so essentially there is accountability. I have something called the Kings of Courage community, where they hold each other accountable in there. There's ways where they can ask to be held accountable, things like that. And it's interesting because part of the human experience is we can have conviction in our decisions when we do something, when we say something, when we speak something. And life can throw us a curveball, and all of a sudden something else in that moment seems more important.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come back, and that's just the nature of the human experience.
Do you think that they're afraid of failing your program and the reason why they are so flaky and not showing up at every group session?
Yes, I think the bigger part of it is not necessarily failing at my program, is self-doubt comes in that they will fail themselves.
Okay.
And so that's a big topic that we talk about as well. And actually, I'm always growing and expanding my course. This week, I'm going to be putting another lesson in there, and it's about a bunch of different reasons why someone isn't getting their results. Either why they're putting in all the action steps and not getting in their results, or they cannot bring themselves to find the discipline or motivation to make it happen. So we address those things and what to do about it. So an example of that would be one of my clients. He had the insight and awareness of a lot of the goals that he has in his life aren't things that he wants for himself, but they're things that he knows that his dad wants for him. So he's still trying to win the love and approval and acceptance of his father. And because they're not goals that are really what he wants, he's having trouble reaching those goals.
Okay.
And he has to learn how to have the bravery to know what he wants and then act on it, even if it means disapproval from his father.
Oh, I see, I see. So, but then the validation from his family member is what dictates his action?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
But the action isn't necessarily what he wants at the core essence of who he is. So there's a disconnection there.
So how do you change his mindset?
Well, I don't change his mindset, only he can.
Yes, that's or how do you guide him to say that, you know what, you're an adult and this is something that you need to make choices for your own life. You cannot really depend on other people's approval or validation.
Yes. And so we've already had that conversation above and beyond. And now he has the conscious rational awareness of that. But it doesn't mean his subconscious mind is on the same page.